My name is Matt Tenney, and this is the What the Speak podcast.
What the Speak, episode 44. That's right.
Do you kick ass when you speak, present, or pitch? If not, these expert discussions and insider tips can help you right now, today. Welcome to the What the Speak podcast. I'm your host, Brian Kelly.
If you don't speak with passion and clarity while inspiring confidence, I'll walk you through an approach I've used to generate over 7 figures in revenue and quadruple my income. Join me live on March 20th for the Presentation Profit Formula, a free training I've created to help increase your income, authority, and influence through better communication. Here's what you'll learn in this action-packed training. First, I'll talk about my 5 P's of a perfect presentation that converts your audience into sales. Next, we'll uncover simple techniques to boost confidence and reduce filler words like and ah. Lastly, we'll look at how to create a sexy presentation that builds instant credibility and positions you as the authority in your field. This stuff is so good, I should probably charge a few $100s for it, but since you're a subscriber, I want to hook you up. If you're finally ready to realize your full potential and become a better communicator, go to whatthespeak.com/formula. Make sure to sign up, and I'll see you there. Matt Tenney, are you ready to answer the question, what the speak?
I am. Yeah, that actually sounds pretty fun. Let's do it.
All right. So Matt, I know that you are the author of the forthcoming book titled Serve to Be Great. You're also an international keynote speaker. Plus, you have an amazing transformational story to share. But let's hear it directly from you. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do?
Sure. Any specific details you want to start with?
Just kind of the general rundown of like what it is that you're about and what people can expect from you, whether they engage you to come and speak at an event or if they hire you to consult on something. Just give us a quick rundown of exactly what it is that you do.
Sure, my pleasure. So the general scope of what I try to do is I have a vision of our world that includes the vast majority of leaders operating as servant leaders. So looking at how they can better take care of their people, serve their community better, all with the idea of not only improving business outcomes, but making an impact on our society. I mean, I think you could probably agree that if we had the vast majority of companies operating with leaders who were servant leaders, who looked at not only what they could do to run their business in terms of profitability, but making the lives of their people better, ensuring that they're happy both at home and at work, and looking at how they can contribute positively to the community around them, it would have a pretty significant impact on our world. So, of course, if I'm a leader of a for-profit company, that may not be the number one thing on my agenda. I may be more interested in, what my shareholders think of me. So, of course, the things that I share are all directly tied to how they can improve business outcomes, whether that's improving customer service, innovation, improving marketing efforts, or improving HR outcomes like attracting and retaining top talent, making sure people are fully engaged while they're there. But I like to connect both of them. So the idea is one doesn't have to go without the other. I think there's this traditional idea throughout history that if we really want to succeed, we can't be a nice guy, or we can't really have a deeply meaningful life. And I think that's bogus. I think that we can not only succeed and have a deeply meaningful life that makes it so that we enjoy going to work every day, enjoy leading our teams. But I actually think those two things are synergistic. The more meaningful our life is, the more that we see that we're having an impact on the people around us, the more success we're going to have. And so I try to offer different case studies and research that shows that is definitely the case. And I introduced that idea based on my transition of doing something that was inherently selfish, and making the transition to realizing that the most meaningful life we can live is one that's devoted to serving the people around us.
I love it. It's a great message. So, Matt, let's say I've got an event that we're going to have in the fall of this year, and I want to hire you to come and speak. What are some of the topics that we might have you come and speak? Is there kind of a quick list or titles of types of presentations that you give that we can get an idea of what you talk about?
Sure. Yeah. So my most popular keynote right now is Serve to Be Great, which is essentially a 1 hour version of the book that's coming out in April. But there's also a keynote that I'll do on ethics, and it's a little bit different. From as far as I know, it's a pretty unique spin on ethics. It looks not only at the culture aspects for how we create an ethical culture, or an ethical organization, but the internal work that we do that is the impetus for all of that cultural change to happen. And it all comes from the ideas that come out of mindfulness training, which is probably my greatest area of expertise. I'm not even sure if you're familiar with that, so we can maybe go into that in a little bit. But then I also do a keynote specifically on mindfulness training and how that not only helps us to be better servant leaders, but also improves mental agility, which is very important for innovation and profitability. But it has the side benefit of increasing our happiness and our well-being. So the idea is, if we're training our people in mindfulness, not only are we improving business outcomes, but we're helping our people to be happier and have greater well-being, which makes it seem like obviously we really care about them if we're going to spend money on training them to do this. So those are the three keynotes, and typically what people have asked me to do is do the keynote on servant leadership, and then do a breakout session or a more in-depth training on how do we implement this, how does mindfulness training get us there, and that type of thing. That seems to be the most popular setup up to this point in time.
Cool. Well, yeah, we'll circle back to this concept of mindfulness in just a few minutes, but I want to transition now to have you talk a little bit about where this all started for you in terms of getting up and speaking. Obviously, starting with public speaking and then now to a place where you're out there professionally speaking and getting paid to share your message. What's your origin story? Where did this begin for you way back in the day? Can you give us a little bit of an insight into where it all started?
Sure. I think we could probably, to keep it as short as possible, we could probably say that it started with the greatest failure of my life, where I attempted to arrange the unauthorized delivery of a very large sum of government money while I was in the Marine Corps, and ended up serving 5.5 years in confinement as a result of doing something that was selfish, violating my integrity. And about a year into it, I started learning about mindfulness training. And within 6 months of training, I realized that I was happier right there in the brig with no possessions than I'd ever been in my life. And the people that I was learning from were principally monastics. And since I had realized, oh my gosh, I'm happier here than I've ever been, and I have nothing, these people must know what they're talking about. So I decided to go all the way with it, and ended up spending my last 3 years while I was confined living and training as a monk. And when I left the confinement, I actually was so enamored by this ideal of a life that's devoted to serving others and contributing to the happiness of others that I almost ordained for the rest of my life. I went to live in a monastery, and I had just about told the monks that I was going to do it. And then I had this insight that, if I really want to be of greatest service, I need to continue to grow. And I think where I could get the greatest growth is to go out and try to live that direction out in the real world. So I started looking for ways that I could serve, and that led to doing volunteer work abroad. I lived in Mexico for almost a year. When I came back to the States, I founded a very small nonprofit organization, and we started working with underprivileged youth, teaching mindfulness and other personal growth tools through the martial arts. And then that led to co-founding the Gainesville chapter of Kids Kicking Cancer, another nonprofit organization, which I've run for the last 3 years and taught classes. And throughout this, I just started noticing this direct correlation between the more focused I was on serving others, the happier I was and the more success I had. And I noticed how mindfulness training was clearly making a difference in my life. And so I started, looking for research that tied both mindfulness training and servant leadership to positive business outcomes, and found that there's just a plethora of it, and realized maybe I could have a bigger impact, and maybe I could go out and start training the people in organizations, how this practice works, how it's going to help them to be better servant leaders, and how servant leadership is going to improve their business outcomes. And then I learned very quickly that if you don't have a very broad professional network, getting started in the training world is a little bit tricky. So I discovered this whole idea of where you can, be a keynote speaker. If you have a relatively interesting story and, you can inspire people to some degree, meeting planners like to have that as a keynote speaker. They're not so concerned about 60 minutes of nonstop content. They want some content that's surrounded by an inspirational message that's going to actually help somebody implement what they hear. And I thought, well, I don't really want to share my story that much, but it's interesting, and if it's going to help people and if it's going to inspire them to take action, then I guess I could do that. And so started looking into the keynote world and getting started doing that. And I just found that the more that I speak, the more that I share my message, and the more that I'm truly focused on how I can be of greater service to society, things seem to take on their own momentum, and it keeps growing.
That's cool. Matt, I think the really interesting thing about your story, which is not different from a lot of people, but the thing that I would point out to everybody who's listening or watching to this episode right now is that you didn't start at that first initial place, or maybe when you were a kid saying, I want to be a keynote speaker. It's this natural evolution and kind of how things had evolved during the course of your life up until this point in time that led you down this path. Then you became somebody who started speaking to share your message, to have an impact, and to ultimately change the world. I know you've got a pretty powerful goal for yourself for making an impact in the world, and things like helping to try and end poverty. And that's powerful for those in the audience that are like, oh, I don't really know much about speaking, or I'm really nervous to get in front of 5 people to talk, let alone 500 people. This is something that if you stay true to what it is that makes you tick, the thing that inspires you to get up every morning, and the thing that really lights you up, and then you share that with others, there's a powerful way that you can do that. And again, it's whether you do it professionally or not is beside the point, but being able to tap into that energy and that enthusiasm, get out there and forget about, how do I look, how do I sound, but really tapping into making a connection with your audience. And so that's so great to hear your story.
I totally agree. And if you like, I could echo your sentiments a little bit just from my experience. I think for somebody that you mentioned that might be a little bit nervous about getting up and speaking, or, they're concerned about how perfect they're going to be. That was, I think, when I started really noticing a shift in my ability to connect with the audience was, I've always been really, really determined to prepare well, and really make sure that I'm rehearsed. I know everything that I want to say like the back of my hand, and it's stuff that I live and it's stuff that I believe. So it's relatively easy. But I noticed that there was, when I tried to make it so that I said exactly what I had prepared to say, there was just this subtle disconnect. I wasn't fully present with myself. I wasn't fully present with the audience. So what I found is that I still prepare, but the moment I get up there, I let it all go, and I'm just really present with where the audience is at, making eye contact with people. And I find that when I do that, if I'm talking about something that I care about, which that's all I do. And for people that are, in a business situation, I think we can always tie elements of what we truly care about to the content that we're delivering. Yes. We can always do that. And the more that we do that, as you mentioned, the more that our message is going to come through as something that's really important to us. And we're going to have more enthusiasm and more energy, which is going to facilitate that connection. Yep. But yeah, I think the more that we just let go of any idea of being perfect, or I can't say, or I can't accidentally put my hand in my pocket one time. All these things are okay. What people are going to remember is, how did you make them feel? Yep. Do you believe in what you're talking about? And is what you're talking about relevant to them and going to help them and inspire them? And if you can do that, they're going to overlook the like the Toastmaster type grading elements of being a speaker, which is great. Those things are great to work on. But I think it's more important to be fully present and make that connection.
Love it. So what I'm witnessing here is, Matt, that you've gone from monk to evangelist. The preacher. Preach it, brother. All right, I'm just messing around. So let's transition now to talking about your unique perspective and really kind of the area of expertise that you've cultivated around the idea of servant leadership as well as mindfulness. So I would love to first talk about with you is, how can taking on an attitude of service when you're speaking to an audience allow you to have a powerful impact when you're communicating? So this is something I know that you talk about when it comes to business, but I'm really curious in regards to applying this principle or this approach to speaking. What are some of the things that can come out of that mentality?
Well, I think that energy is palpable. I think we've probably all noticed this in our interactions. We can almost discern immediately when someone's interests are their own or when they're taking our own interests into account. And I think that energy is palpable in a one-on-one interaction. I think it's also palpable in a group interaction, even if you're speaking in front of 1,000 people. And so I truly believe that when our primary motivation is how can I be of greatest service? What can I do to make the biggest impact, not only in terms of business outcomes, but in really helping change somebody's life and giving them something that's going to make their lives meaningful and worthwhile. I think that energy comes through, and it's people resonate with it. They don't get this sense that the idea is to promote an agenda or to sell products or something like that. The idea is, what can we do to make our world a better place? And even if that's kind of very, very subtle in our message, as long as it's there in some way, people pick up on it because the energy is very palpable.
Got it.
Did that answer your question, or did I miss the mark?
No. I think that's totally right where I was wanting you to go. And, I know we've talked with a number of my past guests about this idea of making this about your audience. When you get up to speak, it's not about you. And again, it's not about how you look or how you sound. It's about what does your audience need. And when you take that stance and you really put them first and you think about how can I provide the most value to them in the next 30 minutes, the next 60 minutes, whatever it is, that really is being a servant. Being in service to your audience is going to allow you to make a connection with them that you might not make if you were more focused on, where do I stand? What do I say? How do I say it? Those are all important things, but really when you come down to the nitty-gritty details of it, it really is about making a connection and letting them know, I'm here for you. This is my story. These are the lessons that I've learned. And I hope that this will help you accomplish what you need to accomplish, inspire you to whatever it is that you might do in your life through your message, through your story. And that's something that if you're in the way of yourself, you're never going to be able to achieve. So I think really is key being able to think about it from how can I serve the audience.
I totally agree. And a really simple way to do that without having to take on some philosophy or mantra or something is, I would imagine that there's this tendency to want to come out like a rock star, right? You get your introduction, and you come out like you're the greatest person ever, and that's how you get introduced. But what I found whenever possible is I like to get out and just talk to people. Before I get up and get on a platform, get out and just have conversations and try to get people talking about themselves as much as I can. And just that, even if they're not expressly talking about what their greatest concerns are, the greatest issues they're facing, just that connection alone, it's very palpable in the audience that, okay, here's somebody that actually cares about us, and here's somebody that got to know a little bit about us before. And it can even start before the talk, when we're talking with the person who invites us to speak. I always ask, what are the issues that they're facing? What are the most pressing issues that your people are facing? And if they don't have a good pulse on it, then I say, well, can I talk with some people and find out, what are the biggest issues that right. the people are facing? And even if my specific content doesn't solve all of those issues, even if it addresses, a few of them or some of them partially, just being able to make that connection lets people know, oh, wow, he took the time to understand us and know who we are and know what our issues are. And that, I think, communicates the message very authentically that you actually do care.
I agree. Well, Matt, let's talk about mindfulness really quickly. Can you give us a very quick synopsis of what the concept is, what it means? And then I would love to ask you, is there anything specifically from this method that would apply to speaking in front of an audience?
Oh, definitely. Yes. Yeah. So the essence of mindfulness training is very, very simple. Most of us, I think if we were to really reflect, our default state of mind is one that we're just constantly thinking. And unfortunately, we spend a lot of times caught up in that thinking. So mindfulness training is just a subtle shift where we're not trying to get rid of thinking or block that out. We don't want to be zombies. But the idea is where our default state of mind is to not get all wrapped up in the thinking and be more present with what's happening now, be more aware of what's coming in through our senses. What do we see? What do we hear? What does it feel like as our feet are on the ground or as we're sitting in a chair? So it's developing this balance where, yes, thoughts can be present, but they no longer are distracting us from the entirety of this present moment. And it's very easy to do for a second or two. The trick is being able to make that our default, where we spend a good amount of our time really, really present and not getting pulled off into our thinking. As I imagine you could intuit, the benefits to this are numerous just in terms of attention alone, not getting distracted. But the practice is very, very effective for developing emotional intelligence, which is an incredibly essential skill for leaders. It's been shown in fMRI brain research to actually change our brain to help us be more servant-oriented, more kind and compassionate, improves creativity. There's a whole range of benefits. But for the speaker, to me, the benefit is immediate and probably obvious as soon as I mentioned that we're being more present. If from the start, before we even get up, as much as I think we'd like to say we never get nervous, I would imagine, you speak frequently, we still get nervous every time,
Absolutely.
Right? There's always a little bit of jitters. And that's perfectly okay. And what mindfulness allows us to do is to be a little bit more aware of how that's actually occurring in the body with greater clarity. And so it creates a little bit of space. So it's instead of if this is our awareness and this is our nervousness, instead of them being just like that, It's kind of like, okay, there's a little bit of nervousness, but there's some space around it. And so when we're not as caught up in our own emotional state, we're aware of it, that awareness and that investigation of what that emotion is. Same with our thinking. When we're aware of our thought process and that space is there, that means that we're not so wrapped up in our own inner world. Because we're aware of it and we have greater clarity about what it is, there's space around it, and that means that we're more present with the people around us and more aware of what is going on for them. And so this, I think, is something you can notice in speakers that have developed this capacity. They could be right in the middle of something, their best line of the whole speech, and somebody sneezes and they'll say, "Bless you," because they're fully present with what's happening in the audience and not so wrapped up in how important what it is that they're saying that they're not going to acknowledge what's happening in the audience. Or somebody looks ill, they might stop in the middle of their speech and just check in. Are you okay? Do you need to step out? These little things are again help that connection. But I think it also helps just in terms of maintaining our clarity while we're speaking. So if we get to a spot where maybe something didn't go well, like I'm sure we've all had the experience of we forget a portion of something we wanted to say. And what we tend to do, I think, naturally as humans, is we dwell on that, and we just say, "Oh man." Like for me, I remember that happened one time while I was being recorded, and I was really counting on this video to make my new demo video. So immediately this inner dialogue starts of, "Oh, I just blew that video," and just being openly honest with, okay, that's okay for that to be there, recognizing that it's there, and just created the space to be able to just continue on without letting that totally ruin the rest of the speech. And it turned out that the audience gave great feedback. They had no idea what I wanted to say. Yeah. They don't know what I wrote. They just know how they feel while I'm presenting.
It's really interesting because a lot of us see those speakers that maybe they have that really good knack for showmanship. And if you think about performing artists, a lot of times it's about them. It's about what they can do, the energy that they bring. And I think those are important things that can be applied to professional speaking, public speaking. But as you're saying, and kind of this mindset that you're describing is that you're not so caught up in the moment of what it is that you're doing that makes you so great or makes people want to pay attention to what it is that you're sharing. But it's the opposite, that you're in tune with what's going on with the audience, that you're able to have that connection, draw them into what it is that you're doing, but then also be drawn into what is going on with them, which I think is a really unique, interesting perspective that we don't hear often. So thanks for kind of giving us that rundown and sharing that insight with us.
Sure. And very quickly, there's one other benefit that just occurred to me.
Yeah.
It's a little bit longer term, which is, some of us give, my Serve to Be Great keynote is the most popular one. I give it all the time. Yeah. And it's, you might think, okay, you're saying this, the same thing over and over and over again. How do you keep it fresh? And I think that's one other area where mindfulness training is very helpful, because it helps us to see each moment as something brand new, and helps us to kind of be in the state or feel the emotion of that moment as though it has never happened before. So it doesn't get stale. It's just, you can really be there and really live it. And the audience, I think, feels that when that happens.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, Matt. So let's wrap things up really quick. We're going to end with some rapid fire questions. Just the first thing that comes to your mind, and then we'll move on to the next one. So, are you a slide or no slide kind of guy?
Yes.
Yes to both.
Would you like explanation?
Why is that?
Well, I think it's helpful in some cases to have images, because, in adult learning, there's many people that are visual learners. It's very helpful for them to have an image. But so I use a mix. I do have some images. I have a couple slides with a few words, but I also have probably a third of my slides are blank. So that's just space. So yes, I think it's good to have a mix to help those who are visual learners, but we don't want to have content up on those slides. They should just be a tag, an image, or a couple words that just help people tag what you're saying to something visual so they remember it better.
Cool.
At least that's how I do it.
Sounds good. Everybody's got their own unique approach, but I'm always curious as to what you like. All right, so if there's one speaker out there right now that you admire that maybe inspires you in what you're doing, who would that be and why?
Probably Simon Sinek. Simon's a friend of mine, and I feel very fortunate to say that, because he had been a hero of mine for years before I met him. And the reason he inspires me is because he's got this tremendous platform that was a result of his very well-known TED Talk. I mean, he gets countless inbound speaking engagements every single day. So he's extremely busy, but he's using that platform to inspire people to take care of each other and to serve each other and to make our world a better place. So I respect that, and it inspires me. It inspires me to do what I do.
Cool. All right. What's the funniest, craziest, most bizarre thing that's happened to you when delivering your message before an audience?
Wow. I don't think I've had anything that crazy happen. I mean, I had a couple minor AV hiccups. I'm sure we've all had that. Right. Although something that was a little strange just happened this past week in Texas. I was speaking to a group, and it was a beautiful, beautiful resort. And the room I was in was all glass. It was like a greenhouse overlooking this lake outside of Austin, Texas. And I was right in the part of my story. It's probably the most emotional for me, from my own history. Where I'm talking about how I'm in this 6x9 cell, essentially in solitary confinement, and my lawyer says I might be there for 70 or 80 years. It's pretty heavy. And right as I say that, the doors kind of over in one corner just blow open, almost like a ghost had opened them, and then this gust of wind comes in, and I just let go of where I was and just said, well, is that supposed to happen? And everybody laughed and kind of lightened up the moment. And then I just kind of rolled with that and said, it's kind of nice to have something humorous happen while I'm sharing, this part of my life, because it's pretty heavy. So it's nice to have some laughter around it. But it was rather strange. It was kind of eerie just at the timing of it, and the fact that the doors opened all on their own.
Well, that certainly counts as a bizarre moment. All right. So how big of an impact has speaking and more importantly, your ability to speak had on your career and your business?
Well, my business is primarily speaking and training. So I would say that not to be, I guess, sarcastic about it, but if I couldn't communicate well, I think my business would probably fail pretty miserably. But I do think that speaking in terms of being able to share a message on a broader scale. So maybe this is a more tangible result. The book that I have coming out, for me, it has nothing to do with generating revenue. All the author proceeds will go to charity. Yep. It's just a way to get the message out on a bigger scale. And I definitely, in fact, I can guarantee you, I would have not had the opportunity to have that book published if I wasn't out speaking so much and speaking to groups that could use a book like that. So those two things fed each other very well.
Absolutely. Well, cool. Our last question that we've got for you before we let you go is, when you first started, when you first realized, hey, this is an opportunity for me to share my message and I'm going to pursue speaking as a regular thing, what's one piece of advice that you wish you had at that time that you now know, or some little inside tip or trick, whatever? Is there something that you can share with the audience?
Yeah, I'll give you a great one from a speaker friend of mine named Peter Billigus, who he talks primarily to college students. He does some corporate work as well, but he talks on finance. And I remember watching him one time where he was doing the opening keynote for a conference where I was presenting, and everything was running behind. And he just looked cool as ice. Like he wasn't concerned about it at all. And I went up and asked him, I said, they're 10 minutes behind and you're totally okay with it. What's going, how do you do that? And he said, oh, it's easy. I plan to talk for 45 minutes so that, if things run behind, I don't have to cut anything out. I just go. And if we finish, if everything's on time, then I have a little bit extra time for a question and answer. Yep. Very, very simple, but I've applied it ever since. And I cut some material out, made sure that I always finish right around 45 minutes. And then I never have to worry about, in fact, that just happened to me last week in Illinois because of the storm. Yeah. Things are running behind and I wasn't worried about it at all. Because we normally get 60 minutes for a keynote, but if you prepare for 45, then you're good either way.
Yeah.
So that's been really helpful to me.
One of the interviews that I did a little while back with Nancy Duarte, she talked, very much to that point that she's like, I usually only prepare 45 minutes. That's enough time for me to say what I need to say and to share that message with the audience. And then there's time for Q&A discussions or, to be prepared for anything that might go awry and set the schedule back a bit. It gives you some flexibility, some freedom. And even for a lot of people, if you're prepared, if you need to stretch it out a little bit, you can always certainly do that and, maybe tell one more story or provide one more example. But really just being comfortable with that flexibility and not being so rigidly bound by what it is that you've prepared and rehearsed. Cool. Well, Matt, we will have links to your website, information about your book, any of your social media accounts, all linked up in the show notes over at whatthespeak.com. And I really want to thank you for coming here today and sharing a little bit about your story and what it is that you do and the insights that you've gleaned through presenting and being a professional keynote speaker. So thank you, and you definitely are somebody who kicks ass when they speak, present, or pitch.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Brian. I really appreciate your time and inviting me to share this time with you.
Sure thing. Today's guest certainly had some amazing insights they shared. If you'd like to purchase a copy of their latest book, visit this episode's show notes over at whatthespeak.com and click the link at the bottom of the page to immediately order their book.
All right, here we go with the outro.
Thanks so much for joining us today on What to Speak. Be sure to visit whatthespeak.com for show notes on every episode and to sign up for our email list to stay updated on resources that'll help you kick ass when you speak, present, or pitch.